Greetings, traveler. All of us who know people who work in the games industry or have heard stories about it often hear that the games industry is plagued with massive overtime problems. People who we know who work there cannot finish in time for drinks in the evenings or for activities in the weekends. And whenever we ask them, how's your project going? They always say, oh, we're so busy, we have to work day and night and always. But what is so special about the games industry and why does this always happen? Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the context of how this happens and the exact reason that causes it again and again and again, no matter how much time passes and how many companies there are there in the games industry. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 13 years now, and I have seen this phenomenon everywhere. In every place that I worked, this has been extremely consistent, whether it's a big or small company, no matter what type of game, no matter the experience of the crew, this always seems to happen. So before we dive into the reasons for the overtime, let's think about a little bit the situation where this happens, right? So we're not talking about this slight overtime that somebody had to do on one day because they want to do something extra. We're also not talking about the type of team that's so motivated and so passionate and is having so much fun making the game that instead of going back home at 5 or 6 in the evening when they're supposed to, they want to stay back and work until 7, 8, 9, 10 because they are having fun. They are finding fulfillment in this type of work and they are enjoying it so much that they would rather do that than go back home and play video games or do whatever else. So we're not talking about that case. If that case happens, obviously it's very, very good. If it's something that gives happiness to someone, then that someone doesn't even count it as overtime. They count it as just doing what they're having fun doing. So we're definitely not talking about that case. We are talking about the case where somehow, even though many things are undecided in the project, specifically specific gameplay loops or specific game elements and so on, or art direction or gameplay direction and so on, even though these things are not decided yet, somehow the deadlines of the project are decided. And it's easy to see why this would be the case, where if you ask someone who hasn't completed the game yet, how much time it's going to take or what elements are necessary, usually you will get a vague answer. This is pretty common across the industry. But if you ask a company executive or a president or a producer how long this project can be in development for, then for them it's a super easy calculation because projects typically have a set budget. And even though the budget might fluctuate over time or there might be additions and so on, at any given moment, the project has a specific budget. So it follows logic that when that budget runs out, the game will either have to be released or be cancelled. And since nobody wants to cancel a project if they can help it, the release date is set naturally at the end of this money runway that the company sets for the project. So that already sounds a little problematic. So how can you have a specific deadline when the specifics of the game are still undecided? Well, let's have a more specific look at this situation and how this appears simple in the beginning and doesn't turn out to be simple at all as development happens. So usually what people experience is you take a look at the project and you assume that, well, for this kind of task or this kind of project, there's an estimated time period. Here I have the time for just one task, which is, for example, creating one level in the game or creating one new character or anything like that. So you think about and you think, yeah, that should take about a month. And it could be also the same for the game itself. It should take about a year or about 3 years. It's very easy to make these assumptions. And at the time when these assumptions are made, it is also an unspoken assumption that this will be followed. People who are more experienced with this know that, initial estimates can blow out of proportion and this and that might happen during development. So wise people will give themselves a buffer of up to twice the time of the initial estimation. So if 1 month was assumed for the task, surely within 2 months, then the task will be complete. This sounds logical, but it never is real. What actually happens is, if the estimated time is about 1 month for a task, no one knows how long it's going to take. No one knows if it's going to take 1 week or a month or a year. The truth is, nobody knows. And the reason why this happens is because most projects will go ahead and jump into production without any sort of actual proof of concept of the game. And I'm not talking about just a short prototype to show off the game or a little tech demo and so on. Those are nice and those are necessary and so on, but there is a vital step that's missing before the team jumps into production. And if you don't know what the production phase of a game project is it's that phase where more or less the size of the game is decided, so how many levels and what type of graphics and so on, and the team is assembled to create this sort of game. So people who can create these graphics, programmers who can program the physics and the servers and whatever else is necessary for the game. So that pretty sizable team is assembled. They are all full-time employees, of course. They're all being paid salaries that are necessary for their positions, and they keep on being paid until the end of the project. So, of course, for any company, salaries are the biggest expense. So you can see how this can become a very, very high expense very, very quickly. So why is it so difficult to know exactly what is necessary to achieve a certain task or how much time? Well, around the games industry, there have been the fables of the complete prototype, or something like a prototype that shows off gameplay to an extent where anybody can sit down and play it and understand what the appeal of the game is. I saw a presentation by Nintendo on Splatoon that showed the early prototype of Splatoon, and how even though that prototype didn't have any graphics as we know them today, the paint mechanic was there, the multiplayer element was there, people were already playing it, they were already having fun with it, and they thought, okay, this is a new type of gameplay, let's make this into a full game. Now, this is not to say that, this is the perfect complete prototype, or you have to do it in that way, but it does show us one way of making an educated decision about what this game is going to be and what we need to make it. Another approach to creating a better prototype is the vertical slice approach. So many companies do this, but unfortunately not enough companies do this, I think. So what the vertical slice means is that, let's say, for example, that you have a game that has 10 levels or 10 chapters or 10 areas for the player to explore. Before jumping into full development and before hiring the big team and going all in and starting paying all these salaries and getting all these machines for everybody to do their work with, you instead focus the effort of whatever team members you have already, or perhaps you outsource part of that work, so that you just create one of these levels or areas or chapters of the game. And the benefit of doing this is that, first of all, you don't necessarily have to hire developers full-time just to make one of these things. And sometimes you do, but it's possible to do it with outsourcing or with just borrowing people from internally from the same company who normally work on different projects. Maybe it's during their downtime now or something like that. So you get this team together, or you outsource the work, and you say, okay, from the, let's say 10 levels that we need for this game, how much time, how much money, how much complexity did it take for us to create just one of them? And the point of the vertical slice is not to create a demo in this case, it's to create a fully fledged chunk of the game. So if we're talking about one chapter of the game, that includes all of the graphics, all of the sounds, all of the voice lines, all of the mechanics. Basically, it should be indistinguishable from the existence of that chapter in the final game. So by doing this, you have a much better idea of how much time the game is going to take to develop. So if one, let's say in a super simple calculation, if making one chapter of the game costs $1 million and you want 10 chapters for your game, then there's a very good chance you will need $10 million to make the whole game, which might sound like a lot of money, but having that calculation early enough in the process gives you a very clear idea and will likely give you the understanding to make the project cost much less than just starting production and just sailing into the unknown full of hopes and dreams. So these are ways to kind of alleviate this question mark here, where you make an estimate but you have no basis to make an estimate with. So how does that connect to overtime? Well, if we don't have a way to quantify how much work is necessary or what is necessary for the game or for the prototype or for the thing that we're making to take, then that deadline that we spoke about at the beginning is still there. The money of the project is going to run out at some point. And yes, you might get an extension from the president of the company or from the investors or from whoever is providing the money. But that still doesn't solve the problem of not knowing how long things are going to take. So because that deadline is still there and it's still ever present, there is pressure on the team to deliver something. And that something is not supposed to be the final game. It's just something that's supposed to convince the executives or the investors and so on that good progress is being made on the game, so they shouldn't cancel the project, essentially. You can easily see how this can become a rat race, and it's just like a dog chasing its own tail. So we're not trying to complete the project, we're just trying to not get the project cancelled. And so this is very different from having a clear goal and trying to meet it, right? It's very clear from saying, okay, everyone, we need to make 10 characters. We have to do it in 3 months. Our work is cut out for us. Let's do it. This is a very different situation. And yes, overtime might be necessary in that case, but there is a clear end in sight and there is clarity on what needs to be done. We know it's these 10 characters, we know the time frame, things can be planned out, and that is when, in my opinion, things like Gantt charts and project management and task organizing tools make sense, because time and effort is known. If we still don't know how many levels the game is going to have and what the art style is going to be and so on, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to make any promise on what the final product is going to be or how long it's going to take or how long it's going to cost. So 2 points emerge from this. Without having this information, it's basically impossible to make any estimate, because you can make whatever estimate you want here. This is always going to be a question mark. And by staying in this situation, overtime is inevitable, because there is pressure on the team to deliver something. Something is going to be decided last minute to show progress, to show that this team is working on something, so the executives or the investors shouldn't cancel the project. So this status of pressure and overtime extends in perpetuity. It stops when the project does get finished or does get cancelled, or just simply too many people quit the project and it cannot go on anymore. So it's a very difficult situation. It's a situation where I found myself many times working in the games industry, and I was wondering why this is happening. Why is this necessary? Why can't we do it in a more sensible way? And as far as I have seen, this is the answer to how we can do this better. So having a more clear idea of what needs to be made and how long it takes definitely alleviates some of the question marks here. In addition, being able to create a prototype that clearly shows the appeal of the game and the gameplay and the specific elements that are necessary to have this as a complete product does wonders for making the road ahead more well known. Also, going with the slice of game approach and creating just one chapter or one area or one level of the game in its full form will also give you a very clear idea of how much things cost and how long they take and what's the complexity, what skills are necessary from the team, and so on. This is extremely helpful. I know it sounds very obvious, but unfortunately I have actually never seen it happen in my work experience up to now, working in other companies. So if it's in your hand out there to help nudge the company or the team in this direction, it's my recommendation to do so. There is also an additional benefit of this, where if you do have your completed prototype or you do have the completed slice of game, then that becomes naturally an excellent demo for showing it to people, getting feedback, doing press releases and creating gameplay videos of the game and so on. And gamers these days, they're so well educated with reviewers and YouTube videos and articles about games, where it's basically impossible to get around the fact that a game might not be fun to play. I know that cinematic trailers are still a thing, but I also notice that more and more people look for gameplay videos and real game footage rather than a flashy CG video. Anyway, these are my thoughts about why overtime happens and how it happens and why it affects so many people, and also hopefully what is a way to wiggle past it and make more meaningful choices and have a better development experience, and thankfully our ultimate goal, better games. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, and as always, have fun.